The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of its hosts, guests, or callers, and do not necessarily represent the opinions of WTBR-FM, its management, other producers, or sponsors.
Hi, everyone. You're listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM, Pittsville, with Roberta McCulloch-Dews of the Mayor's Office in the city of Pittsville. Thanks for tuning in. Today we have with us Alex Reczkowski, Library Director for the Berkshire Athenaeum, Pittsville's public library. And this year, Alex is also serving as president of CWMARS, the library network for more than 150 libraries from Worcester through Western Massachusetts. And he was recently appointed president of the Pittsville Rotary. So Alex is one busy man. Welcome, Alex. Let's get started.
Thank you so much, Roberta. I'm so glad to be here.
So, Alex, we have a lot to talk about, but I always like to get some biographical information from my guests to set the stage. So, your hometown is Ringtown, PA. I've never heard of Ringtown before.
Who has, Roberta? It's a town of about 800 people, and I was thinking about it so much this morning. I was at the library with Margaret Hintz, who's one of our great library volunteers.
Yeah.
She works on the book sale with Nancy McNabb and a whole team, and we were talking about picking strawberries. She was just up in Lanesboro picking some strawberries and saying how delicious and wonderful they are. And that took me back, because when I was back in Ringtown, my first job was working on a farm.
Really?
And I have literally picked tons of strawberries.
How old were you when you worked on the farm?
My first year, I was 13.
Okay.
And that year, I mostly picked weeds and rocks.
Now, was it sort of a rites of passage, so to speak, for everyone to sort of work the farms in Ringtown?
Ringtown was an agricultural community, so a lot of us did. The folks who owned the farm were a distant cousin, so my sister had worked there when she turned 13, and then, yes, it was definitely a rite of passage.
So is it like one of those towns where everyone knows everyone and everyone sort of knows your business?
Not just your business, but your relative's business. They know who's related to who. They know everything. There are no secrets, just like Pittsfield, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, Pittsfield, it's interesting because people always say, oh, Pittsfield is a town, but Pittsfield is a city of 44,000. That's no Ringtown.
That's no.
How many individuals were in your graduating class?
So for high school, we went to a regional high school.
Okay.
So there were 150 in my high school graduating class. But we still have elementary school class reunions. There were 17 of us in our kindergarten class.
Are you guys close? Do you stay in contact?
I actually stay in contact closer with my elementary school friends than with my high school friends, to be honest.
Yeah, you guys were a close group.
Yeah, we spend kindergarten through 6th grade together. We
just
really knew each other.
Just
the 17
of us. Okay, yeah, that's a small and close group. Very interesting. So, did you just have a hankering to get out of Ringtown? Was it something like, okay, this small town is really, working my nerves, or was it, I just want to see the world? I mean, what was it?
Yeah, I think it's like that Sweet Charity song, right? There's got to be something better than this.
Yeah.
There's got to be something better to do.
Yeah.
So when I turned 15 or 16, one of my really close friends, she and I started making day trips or a couple weekend trips to New York, because New York, that was where life was. That made us feel so adult.
The big city.
It is.
How'd you get there? By bus?
We did take a bus a few times, and then once she got her driver's license, we got brave.
Okay.
And we would go in her Jeep and drive into the city. She was the brave one, a year older than I was, so she would always drive. And it's so funny. When we were growing up, we wanted so much to be adult.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And now that we're older, we so much try to find ways to be.
Isn't that always the case? I mean, I remember when I was a teenager and I couldn't wait to grow up. And I remember folks around me would say, enjoy your childhood. You only have it for a short amount of time. And you don't want to hear any of that. You want to, wear makeup and, and look older than what you really are. And then when you're older, then you're trying to look younger.
Well, there's no age limit on makeup. You could surely be dressing up when you were younger.
Yeah.
But you grew up in the city, so that's a very different kind of...
I did. I grew up in the Bronx. And I mean, it's such an interesting vibe because when you're being a city kid, even though I wasn't in Manhattan, I mean, when you're in the boroughs, it's still a part of New York. It's just a different vibe. I mean, you learn how to, use a public transportation at an early age. You take the subway, buses, all of that. And I think about my kids and putting them in a setting like that. I mean, at like 12, 13, I was taking the bus, I was taking the train without supervision, and because that's what I grew up around.
Right. That is such an interesting thing to me to look at how we treat our kids now. When I was growing up, we lived in the middle of nowhere, so we were out riding our bikes everywhere. We'd be 5 miles from home. Nobody knew where we were exactly at that time.
Yep.
And nobody was worried.
Yeah. It was such a different time, though, Alex. I mean, I feel like it was... In some ways, I mean, I don't want to say it was totally safer because I think we still had elements of, missing children and things like that. And there were things going on. But I feel like maybe we're more aware of the elements of danger. I don't know. It just seems like we put the reins on a few things. And also we live differently. We had more community settings. Now everyone sort of has, it's like their own fiefdom, right? They have their home, their yard. Everyone stays inside their perimeter. It's just different. So that sense of community, I think, has evolved as well, depending on where you live.
There's also a different sense of how we should be spending our time and our days.
Yeah.
We're so programmed. I think about you with your kids and you're running. If you're not running to football, you're running to wrestling, or you're running to the play practice.
Have you been following me on Facebook, Alex?
And that's just so different.
It's different. I think every aspect of our kids' lives today feel almost prescribed, right? Like you sketch it out. And I think growing up, there were elements where I had those boundaries as well. My brother and I, we did. But we had free time to play and imagine and just ride our bikes, and the landscape allowed for that. We were able to go on adventures and come back. It's different when you live in areas where you don't have sidewalks. Right? So if you just have a road and there are cars, the element of danger, I think, is more heightened. So it's different. Different perspectives. But so Ringtown offered you that sense of adventure, but you're still able to go to New York City and stretch your imagination.
Sure. Well, Ringtown really gave a sense of community. I remember when I was 4, before I started school, I was so upset about starting school because I had my life before school. My mom worked, so I was staying with my grandmother.
Yeah.
My grandfather was also working, and she and I had our daily routine. We would go to the local soda shop around lunchtime and split a soda together and hear what all the gossip was in town, and then go to the little market next door and hear all of the gossip in there. And so I got this real sense where I knew people and people knew me. We cared about each other, that sense of community, and I think that's something that's still possible here in Pittsfield, even on a bit larger scale.
All right.
So I think that knowing each other was a great foundation. And then the city represented a bit of anonymity, and that's where the adventure came in, because nobody was watching, but also there were more possibilities, right? There was no French Connection in Ringtown, PA.
Okay, you mentioned French Connection because I used to work there.
So you asked about did I take a bus to New York? The first bus I took to New York, it left us off on Avenue of the Americas in front of French Connection. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is fancy.
Yeah, French Connection was the place. I still think they're in business. But yeah, I worked there. It was right on Broadway and West 4th. And
you were in the downtown one, of course.
Yeah, but in the Village.
By NYU.
Yeah, by NYU, my alma mater, class of 2000. Hey, but it was such a great time. Such a great time going to school in the Village in the late 90s. Great times.
I was right behind you. I was in Hayden Hall the summer of 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just missed you.
That's so interesting because I remember Hayden and I didn't dorm. I didn't stay on campus. So I commuted from Queens. I was in a 2-fare zone, took a bus to a train every day. 4 years of college, right?
Was that from Queens?
I took the Q4, and then I took it to Parsons and Archer and caught the E train and the E from Parsons and Archer to West 4th. Yeah,
I remember ACE, baby.
Yeah, every day. And I'm telling you, when you have to take public transportation to get around, your time management has to be on point because when you miss that bus, you miss that bus. And trains, as you know, in New York, whether back in the day, it was always breaking down. There was always a train that was breaking down somewhere. There was a delay. Someone pulled the emergency brake. So
the queue isn't working, isn't running today.
You would be like, okay, goodness. So you always have to actually pad in time for any kind of mishap that could occur. You know, I always say here I'm in my car. What traffic is there? It's so funny. It's all relative. That's why I'm like, please, just enjoy the ride because you really don't know traffic.
No,
you have no idea what traffic
I was behind
is.
one slow car this morning on Penn Street, and I thought, what is happening?
It's like my world. Oh my goodness. But all right, so let's bring it from New York City to Pittsfield. You once said that Pittsfield offered the best of both worlds. Was it kind of a love at first sight kind of thing when you got here?
Oh, yeah, it was kind of magical. I think when I first moved here, I thought, oh, it's so close to Boston. It's so close to New York. I'm going to be visiting these cities all the time. And then I got here and realized that the city comes to Pittsfield, right? The city comes to the Berkshires.
Right.
And so we have, I can relive my childhood. I can go out on that bike path and ride all day, all the way up to Adams and then all the way back and still have this world-class art scene.
Yeah. We
We have just tremendous... Well, all of the great resources. We have all the museums, we have all the theaters, we have dance, we have culturals. Yeah, it's...
So what year did you first arrive here?
I came to Pittsfield in 2010.
That's when I had my daughter. What month?
August.
I had Kennedy in July. I was very pregnant when we arrived here, and I got here in June of 2010, and she was born at BMC in
month
July.
later.
Yep, that's right.
And you were saying, thank God I'm not in Sheboygan.
Oh, my goodness. That could have been, right? So it was either Pittsfield or Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And good old Pittsfield won out.
Well, we're lucky for it.
And I loved it. I mean, I feel like having lived in other places, I have that perspective of knowing what is. And the community we lived before we moved here, it was a great community of people, but in terms of the offerings, it did not have what Pittsfield has. I always tell folks, you don't understand what you have. You truly do have the best of both worlds. If you really want to get away and escape into nature, you can. If you want to have a little bit of an urban flair, you have that. And an urban flair comes with its characters. That's what an urban flair has.
We've got flair.
Right. We've got tons of flair. And I think that just adds to Pittsfield's character. And that's why that's why we love it. So yeah, we're happy we're here. So Alex, when you're here, you're like, this is my new community. What were some of the first things you did to get involved?
Well, I was lucky that I worked at the library, so I knew about the Museum Pass program.
Okay.
So the library has passes for lots of our local cultural organizations. You borrow the pass, you can go see it. When you first move here, that's a lot. You go to each one of these and you're shelling out $20, $25
Absolutely.
at each one. So that let me get a grounding for where I felt like I fit in.
Okay.
And then I found where I wanted to become a member myself.
Okay.
And really one of the first very welcoming things was I went to a dance party at New Stage Performing Arts that was up above the Beacon. And I met Nikki Wilson, who was the artistic director there, and we just clicked. And she said, okay, you've got to meet everybody. And I don't know, within a week, I was stage managing a show at the Colonial there. It was very fun. Yeah.
Wow.
And so then you just get to meet people and talk to people in that way. And soon you know everybody.
Well, I'm going back to your past in Ringtown, and the fact that, I mean, obviously you had a job that granted you access into some of these worlds and connections, but you also had that foundation where you weren't afraid to speak to people. You knew the art of conversation. That's, again, something that we don't necessarily always see today, right? Because we're on our devices. But when you had no devices and you had to have that conversation, it helps when you move to a new community and you're getting to know people.
Yeah, I really have my undergraduate education to thank for that. And you might relate to some of it. I went to a same-sex college institution. I went to Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia. And in the key, that was the name of the book that you got when you became a student. It had all the rules of how to be a good student there. And one of the major rules there was you are to greet everyone you meet on campus. And you know, we really lived it. And so that practice, I don't know, some of it is just about having permission.
Yeah.
You know, I think sometimes we walk down the street and we don't feel like we're even allowed to say hi to people.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, you mentioned just the type of, in terms of the environment. And my high school was a all-girls Catholic high school in the Bronx and Yonkers because it was on the border of both. And there was one thing that they used to always say, when you go through a door, always look behind you and hold it open for the next person coming through. Never let a door slam in the next person's face. And it's such a simple gesture, but it means a lot, right? It means a lot. And I'm always aware. I watch people. I'm always aware when I see folks who don't look behind them and they let the door slam. And not to say that symbolizes some big, great, ideology or anything, but it's a simple thing, right? I look at the ones who look back and the ones who don't. Right?
Well, this is just a great practice of caretaking.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely.
As we think about how much we talk about the need for self-care these days, especially coming out of a pandemic, I think caretaking for ourselves and for others is so important. And how we treat others, that also helps us remember how to treat ourselves.
Well, you're absolutely right, Alex. I think that we have to actually give more thought to that nowadays, because sometimes we're so in our bubble that we don't take the time.
So we can take some of that air out. We can take some of that pressure off, right? That this isn't rocket science, right? We don't have to be Stephanie Wilson to know how to do this. That these small simple steps,
Alex,
and that's a lot of the work that we do at the library.
Well, I want to get into the work that you do at the library because you actually. In your former position, you were supervisor, I want to say, of technical services, right?
That's right.
All right. And so you then you took over the library director position from Ron Latham, who was a longtime library director. And I want to say you assumed your role in 2016.
That's right. You did your homework.
I sure did. So
what's interesting about the technical services position is that really is like the magical caretakers in the library.
How so?
So when you walk into the library, I think it's just like when you walk into a store, you just think, well, the stuff is all there. The books are on the shelf. Of course. You don't think about somebody had to pick it out. Somebody had to order it from our vendors. Somebody had to pay the bill for it. Somebody had to catalog it so you can find it and you can put holds on it. Put a nice book jacket on it. Put all of the stamps and everything on it. It just seems like things just appear there. And that's the work that technical services really does.
Interesting. So sort of behind the scenes, making sure that the stage is ready for everyone to enter, right? But you take that sort of back, behind the scenes role.
Yeah, of course. And it's about, it takes a lot of pre-planning, right? You want to have the book on the shelf the day that it comes out, or you want to have that new CD the day that it's dropped.
Wow.
So that patrons can borrow it right away, and that means you got to have everything ordered in time, so it comes in time, and you have the workflow in place.
That's a key role.
So it's ready. Yeah,
that's a huge role.
Yeah, people don't want to be waiting for all the new exciting stuff.
Of course, especially when they get their library alerts too. They want to make sure
we get the Wowbury every Saturday.
Right.
You put that hold on. I'm going to be first on the queue.
That's right. When they get their library alert, they want to make sure that product is there when they get in.
Yeah.
So, Alex, was this something that you ever imagined for yourself? Because I know your passion, I know your passion was for the library. Like, I know when you were 5 years old, I know you had your own makeshift library. You had a little bookcase, and you used to have your own stamp where you'd stamp your little books, and you knew where everything was. You were a one-man librarian with the library in your house. So I know that you had this long-standing passion for library work. But did you ever envision yourself in the leadership capacity?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Of course. When I interviewed with Ron, one of the questions in my interview for technical services supervisor was, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah.
And I said, well, Ron, when are you retiring? I had come from a background as an undergrad. I have a degree in applied math and in fine arts, and my fine arts work was in a lot of theater directing, stage managing, assistant directing, and so I had formal training in being a director.
Yeah.
Right, and so I knew that kind of direction was somewhere in my future.
That was such a bold answer. Wow.
Well, it was true.
Yeah.
I had been working in libraries for, I don't know, probably almost 10 years by then. 10 years by then. So I knew.
So you knew what you wanted.
Was. Yeah, for sure.
More power to you, because I think the fact that you were honest to say it, because some people wouldn't have been that honest.
Well, I was the library director in my little library when I was 5
You
in
were.
the bookcase. And books always felt so magical to me, so powerful to me.
Yeah.
A fun story is one of my great aunts, I believe, was believed in my small town to be a witch. She was actually murdered in 1929 or 1930, I think, because she put a hex on a farmer. And so
Alex, I heard about that story, and I thought you were going to tell me like 1800s or something like that. 1929.
I think it was 1929. I'd have to go back and look.
That's still like modern times.
And so I felt like my grandmother must have had some of her witch spell books, because she had some books that I was, they were just adult books and hard bound, leather bound books, and I felt like, oh, these are the magic spell books.
Yeah.
I'm
envisioning like Witches of Eastwick or something.
But I felt that power. Yeah. And of course, I don't know about spell books. Maybe I think there is a new witch store on North Street in Pittsfield.
I think
they might have a spell book, but really the power in the books is in the stories.
I agree. I am a book lover myself. You know that I always frequent the book sales when they occur, because for me, it's all about words. I love words. I love books. I like to hold books. I like to read books, actual books. I do not like to read on devices. I actually like to carry books with me. It makes my bag a lot more heavier. But for me, my love affair with books started as a child as well. And back in the 80s, they called them media centers. So you had your library, but then there was also a little entertainment section, and they'd have students, I guess, watch TV before school starts or something like that, or if there was like a special movie that they would show. But I had this predilection toward cookbooks. I used to check out cookbooks. Not that I was going to actually make these things, but I used to love reading the recipes.
Well, they give you such a great insight into different cultures.
Yeah. Well, the one I used to love was Laura Ingalls Wilder, the Little House on the Prairie cookbook.
What did you love about that?
Well, because it just, first of all, I think because Little House on the Prairie was on TV back then, and I think it was this great supplement, but it made me think about like life on the prairie, like on the range. And I got to tell you a story. So there was a recipe for roasted acorns, right? And why on my way home from school, I collected acorns and proceeded to go home and try to roast them in the oven. But
how'd that work out?
It didn't, because you have to crack the acorn
you gotta open them, right?
And I didn't know how to do that.
You got to be a squirrel to open an acorn.
But I think why that story is so endearing to me now as I look back is because my imagination was full throttle, right? I read this recipe and I thought I could do that. And books for me were always a gateway. They were a gateway to adventure, to a different life. And I was always reading. And even in class, I was always reading when I wasn't supposed to. So I understand fully your love of books.
I love that idea of daydreaming and imagination with books.
Well, that's what they allow for. You know, they allow you to escape.
This is one of the challenges of kind of the information landscape that we're now in. The library used to be busier with folks coming in looking for what we might call trivia, right? Because we didn't have Google in our pocket or Wikipedia in our pocket to see when was this person born? Did this person die? What was that person's name? Remember, they wrote the movie about the thing. And you know, we have that, and so we've gotten away from that. But I think in having that fingertip answer, we've lost some of that space to imagine, to dream, to remember. And I think our memories have shifted. I'm sure there's science to prove that. But also the way that we relied on our community for info. I can remember so many holiday gatherings around the table with my family, you know, debating about who lived in this house and wait, where was that house and what was that street? And now, you know, we'd pull out the Google Maps or we'd pull out the Zillow and see when was that house sold. And we've lost some of that space, even some of the space for being okay with not knowing, being okay with maybe being wrong when it didn't matter. And sometimes I worry about our desire to have the perfect answer or the exact answer, even when it's not.
No, I feel you, Alex. It's I think you're absolutely right. We have lost something, even though we have tremendous gains. You know, technology allows for so much. You know, that moment where, I mean, I remember back in the day, again, we used to have encyclopedias, right? And when you had to do like a book report or something, you had to look it up and you had to search for information. And I think going back to your point about searching for information, being on the hunt, that curiosity. Right now, our curiosity can be settled within a matter of seconds. Right? So there it goes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and some of the serendipity of what you find next to it. I mean, I think that might be part of what the physical book versus electronic book. When we get electronic resources, we usually just go directly to them. But when we're browsing on the shelf, we find this book that's four books down or a shelf down.
And you're like, oh, I like that one too.
Yeah, sometimes we don't know exactly what we want.
Right, because books speak to you. It's whether it's the cover art, whether it's the type, something about a book speaks to you. And if you're a book lover, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then there's the whole tactile experience as well, just turning those pages. Then there's also that scent, right? I know. So if you're a book lover, then you totally understand. If you're not, then you're like, what is she talking about?
You're right. There's so much coded information in a physical book.
Yeah.
You can probably look at books and just by their shape, their size, their feel, the colors, the graphics, you can tell that that's your, you know, that's one of the books you're looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, when we think about like librarians and people who work in a library, do you think that there's a perception of what that individual looks like?
I don't know, Roberta.
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, certainly libraries have been dominated by female staff. So I think there's this female perception.
Right.
Although I have to say with some embarrassment that a lot of directors have been male, right? So lots of times there would be a man in charge and then women in the public service roles. But I don't think that that's particularly unusual for a public service job, right? But sure, I mean, everyone thinks about a middle-aged white lady with her clacky shoes and her bun and glasses on a little chain.
And a vest.
Sure.
A sweater
and a vest. And a vest, maybe. Sure. But that's just like just the way maybe we pictured who a doctor was.
Right.
Or who a nurse was or who a taxi driver was.
How images get ingrained into our subconscious.
And certainly we have lots of diversity at the library.
So when you think about those who are going into the profession today and your fellow librarians across the state, what do they look like?
Well, I will admit it's still unfortunately very white.
Okay.
It's a white-dominated profession still. There are a lot of programs to help bring diversity into it.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it's a big step to get to be a professional librarian, that master's degree step, and the work and the money it takes to get that degree, and then the potential payout, the salary that you get in return for that. People do the cost-benefit analysis, and so it's. I think that's contributing a bit to the lack of diversity. But it's, I would say the next generation are passionate people. We're seeing this, right? There's some data on millennials about they are looking for more meaningful work.
Right.
And that pay is maybe not their first priority.
Right. It's the whole work-life balance kind of thing.
Yeah. There's also a bit of caring about access and privacy. So librarians are on the forefront of privacy, right? We've always told everyone how we're not going to tell people what books you're reading, and that privacy is a central tenet to us. And that's a privacy that we're seeing people give away so easily now. How many apps on your phone say, we're going to track you for this, and you're giving us permission to track your location and put cookies on there so I know every other website you went so I can give you that advertisement. And so I think that librarians are tuned into wanting to protect that privacy, wanting to be aware of how that understanding of someone, having all of those pieces of information can be used to manipulate someone. And so I think there's a little bit of that radical freedom feeling.
It's an interesting dichotomy because you talk about the privacy aspect and the commitment to that. And on the other hand, there's the other end of the spectrum where libraries are also really committed to that access. So there's the access and then there's the privacy. And shifting toward the access, one of the things that I know for the Berkshire Athenaeum is that, the brand, it's all about welcoming. And there is a tagline, right, that says, welcome everyone.
Our tagline is Wonder Inside.
Wonder Inside, but
Wonder Inside. So that's our
promise.
public, but our brand promise. This is what the brand means to staff. This is what tells us if we're living up to this brand, if we're living up to a place where people can wander inside, that means welcoming everyone.
And so what does that look like in terms of your work? How does that inform the work that you do every day? You and your team.
Yeah, for sure. It's about meeting people where they are. It's about making... This is really a challenge in our community where we have so many strata, so many differences, and the library is a place where everybody comes.
Right.
So it's a place where people who have differences really interact with each other. It's maybe one of the few places, right? Even at the grocery store, there's who goes to the grocery store at certain times of day, You know who the Saturday shoppers are versus the Tuesday night shoppers.
Right.
But the library, we've got some people from all parts of the community. And so it's about supporting the staff so we can be comfortable with everyone. Because lots of times when we meet people with differences can lead to fear,
right?
And that fear leads to space and not welcoming people. So it's about breaking down those fears, seeing each other as having equal rights and equal interests. Everybody's interest is so interesting.
Very
right. It can be so fun going down a rabbit hole with somebody looking for the perfect book,
right?
And that can be about a subject that is of no interest to me, but just feeding that curiosity can be so fascinating. Right now, in some practical ways, we've been we changed some of our hiring policies and what we're able to compensate people. So we do have a foreign language incentive. So folks who are fluent in a foreign language get paid an additional $2 an hour. And so that's part of recruiting so that our staff can look more like the community and so we can serve more of the community.
Right. Have you found that the library is frequented in even a more, frequent manner, I should say, because there was a time when people thought like with technology, it would lessen the importance of a library. Have you found that there is this steady drumbeat of people coming in, looking for resources and services?
For sure. Our resource, the media changes.
Yeah.
Maybe some folks aren't looking for a physical book anymore. Yeah. Maybe they're looking for a large print book. Maybe they're looking for an audiobook or an ebook. But people still have those needs, have that curiosity. If we're to believe Aristotle, all humans desire understanding. So we have this innate desire to understand. And that's what the library does, is connect people with resources. So yes, people might have internet, but the library has the fastest internet in the city, right? Okay. We have a fiber connection that I don't know. There might be a business in town that has a faster one. Okay, there may be some business, but on the consumer level,
right?
And free, right? And so people are still coming in. People don't have printers at home anymore, so they come in for a printer. Or what really the library has, and what the greatest asset of the library is. That's the staff. Yeah. That's the community that comes there. The library is this magical third place. Where else can you go and be welcomed and have people want to help you find answers to your questions? Right. Have people want to give you things to take home? Right. So it's still this magical place that I don't see the demand going down.
So tell me, in addition to books, what are some of the most popular resources that when people come into the library, they're like, I want that, or this is what I'm interested in? Do you have sort of maybe like those that would number your top 5?
Sure. Well, I gotta say, books are still the top.
Okay,
people,
number
and
one.
DVDs.
Okay,
books and DVDs.
DVDs, really?
Yes, yeah. People. There's been some shift now that folks are doing more streaming.
Yeah.
But we do have streaming video. We have the Canopy streaming video. But people do still come in for DVDs quite a bit or borrow them from other libraries. Probably some of the more interesting things are the library hotspots. So you can come and borrow a cellular hotspot, and I think people love it to go to the lake or the cabin or the beach or out of town or wherever.
Do you find that most people are in the know about the library hotspot? Like, who's checking out the library hotspot?
Everybody is checking them out. Everybody is checking them out, for sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I would say the Wi-Fi in general is something people come to the library for, since we do, it is faster Wi-Fi. You're going to get a faster upload speed. So if you're uploading your videos and they take forever at home, I know download is usually faster. So people, even on the weekends or days when we're closed, people will sit outside to grab our Wi-Fi for that.
Wow.
So, because, and then, in terms of borrowing, I could probably talk about our e-resources, which have just boomed during the pandemic. Everybody's been borrowing ebooks and e-audio. But I think for our library, I really have to talk about our local history department. Okay. Because we have all of these great genealogical resources and amazing local history resources. So rich. And the staff to support it, to help you find things.
That's important to have that knowledge, right? Not only in the catalog, but really in the library itself.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
One of the major lessons that was kind of eye-opening when I was learning how to be a reference librarian is don't forget that people are resources. That sometimes your best resource is asking someone, because that book hasn't been written yet.
Right.
But people know the story, and we certainly have that.
I love it. I remember during the pandemic, there was a feature, and I don't know if the library still offers it, where people could, get their books and then like come and pick it up. Do you still offer that?
Yeah, we do offer curbside service. It is, people really like to come in and pick up their books and not have to schedule the time. So we will offer it for folks who aren't comfortable coming in or who have mobility issues that don't want to come into the building. Yeah, you can still get curbside down at the Bartlett Avenue entrance.
Nice. All right. So I want to go into some of the trainings that you've participated in, because I think that it's part and parcel also of the work that you're doing. So you've participated in community building trainings like trauma-informed community approaches, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism. Wow, that's, when I'm thinking of like a library, I'm not necessarily thinking of these kind of engagement opportunities, but they're so necessary and they help, obviously, to inform the work that you do. How so?
For sure. I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about welcoming everyone. To be a place that welcomes everyone, we want to understand how to do that. And so I think we can be really proud in the Berkshires that we've been doing this work for years. When I think back on, the first meetings on trauma-informed community were at the Colonial, if I remember correctly, and that was probably 5 years ago at least. And that one of the main lessons from that is when you're faced with a challenging situation, to resist asking people, what's wrong with you? Or what's wrong? And to go more towards what happened. Explain the situation. Let's learn what happened. And it's so funny, we're going back to those small things. That small shift in questioning, that small shift in perspective can help us meet each other and actually communicate rather than put up barriers and defense mechanisms. So that has really changed how we work when there is a problem at the library. People come in with all sorts of problems. And I remember this is one of the most heartwarming moments for me. We had a patron who came into the library, and staff recognized that something wasn't right. And we said to the patron, "What's going on? Are you feeling okay? What's happening?" And they admitted that they hadn't been feeling well that morning. And in that conversation, we recognized some common signs for stroke and got them to the emergency room.
Wow! So
that they had a faster recovery. They were actually having a stroke, and so it just building that relationship and seeing people and being able to communicate in a respectful way.
That's just, okay, the significance of that. I'll just break it down. The fact is that in order to see that, you had to see the person, right? There's power in looking at another individual, fully looking at them and seeing them and recognizing when something is off. And too many times we don't see each other, right? In order for them to have seen the signs of the stroke, which was, they had to know something was off, but you have to see the person. And I think that goes to the heart of a lot of this work, seeing each other. We don't see each other.
You're right. You're right. And maybe that's also some of the magic of the library, that we're allowed to see each other there. I think when sometimes in public places, when we're walking down the street, we feel like we're not supposed to. Don't be bothering other people. Don't be making eye contact. Don't be. Don't invite people into your world. And that's exactly what we're doing every day, is inviting people into our world of the library.
Shift.
So on some more of the support that we've had, I know I had some trainings at MCLA. They did some of the DEI trainings, and I was fortunate enough to participate in some anti-racism training that Jacob's Pillow provided for their staff and some community partners, with the just opening up and having people feel like it's okay to recognize and talk about our differences. I think that's one of the challenges is when we say race, right? we think of people of color,
Right.
and just talking about white being a race, and
Right.
what does that mean to us?
Right.
Just having, and that's not that big of a conversation, right?
Right.
You can say, what does it mean to you to be white?
Right.
I mean, it's a big conversation, but in a safe place with
Right.
people that you're safe with,
Right.
you can have that and talk about it.
Yeah, I think that you're right about that, Alex. Is that too oftentimes we shy away from the conversations that we think might be uncomfortable, lest we be judged, say the wrong thing, say something, and so there's a lot of fear that goes behind not having the conversation. But sometimes we have to just figure out a way to work through that fear and to have the conversation, because that's the only way we're going to move forward, when we start to actually face things and talk about it.
Yeah, the fear and the distance keeps the distance.
Absolutely. And it allows preconceived notions and other things to thrive, right? So in that gap between the conversation and the non-conversation is the gap of just that space. And in that space, a lot of things can flourish, right? Including the distance.
And the solution, the cure we're all looking for coming out of a pandemic is connection.
Absolutely.
The pandemic isolated us, pushed us away, made us afraid of each other, masked us, distanced us, and connection is really the way through. That's what we're doing at the library. We are connectors, connecting people to people, connecting people to resources.
Right.
So,
and you found a way, even during the pandemic, that connection still continued, albeit in a different way, but it still continued. And that's why you guys are doing great things. If you had to, are there things that you want people to know right now, things that are coming up in the coming weeks and months, anything that you just want on folks' radar? Before we switch, because I want to get your recent trip to Serbia. I want to talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
So
the library, you got to just check out the website, pittsfieldlibrary.org.
All right.
Every day there's so many.
Yeah.
There's so much going on.
Yeah.
There's lots of change. This is this is probably the hallmark. I'm a change maker. The staff
and
sometimes
it's free, folks. It's free.
Your library card is free.
Right. So if you don't have a library card, then you're just not with it.
And you can use your library card from one of our surrounding communities as well.
Yes.
Everybody in CW Mars, we're over 150 libraries, and we all share resources.
Keeps you connected. All right.
That's right.
Got to check out the Berkshire Athenaeum. All right. So you just came back from Serbia.
I did.
All right.
Yeah.
I need to know all the details. What a trip.
Yeah, this was a really special trip. About 3 years ago, I was looking at some Rotary programs. I'm part of the Rotary Club. And
you are the president of the Pittsville Rotary.
That's right. For 2022, 2023, I am the president. Imagine that. Our theme for Rotary this coming year is imagine. So imagine all the things that Rotary can be. And so one of the tenets of Rotary is peacemaking and promoting peace in the world. This has a lot of avenues. Rotary is really responsible for the almost eradication of polio. We're almost done with polio. It's so close. There have been a few free cases in Pakistan.
Wow.
But that's primarily been it. So we've almost gotten polio done. And another way that we work is just understanding that community service, serving with others, is a way of building friendships and connections, and that fellowship leads towards peace. And so the Rotary Foundation cooperated with USAID, our governmental aid organization, so that they incentivized us doing more friendship building with Eastern Europe. Little did we know how important that would be. Right? It seems all the more important now with the conflict in Ukraine. And so we were able to have Rotary Foundation match our local club's donations, and then have USAID also match our donations.
Wow.
So we were building up, making a bigger gift out of our gift. And so we were able to buy computers, projectors, equipment, furniture, manipulatives, and also curriculum. So we paid teachers to write the curriculum for preschool and kindergarten classrooms in, I think, in total, it's about 120 classrooms in Serbia. And so we were the first club to sponsor it here in Pittsfield, and now a club in Savannah, Georgia is picking it up for another year.
Now, will it be the same school in Serbia or
No, so this is expanding it to more of the schools.
Okay.
So we worked with a town called Bor.
Okay.
It's in southeast Serbia, just south of Belgrade, which is the capital city. And that club worked with the Ministry of Education for the country, and the ministry was so impressed with how this project worked that they got more support to expand it, and now it's going to expand even more through this continued work with the Savannah Club.
Wow. Now, I have to ask, with the ongoing conflict going on in Ukraine, was there any trepidation as to this trip and the timing?
Sure. I timed the trip to visit when another group from Savannah would be going, so we'd have a larger group visiting. And Serbia is pretty close to Ukraine. So on the American side, I was the only one from our Massachusetts group that was going on this trip. Other people, because of also pandemic concerns. But honestly, when I got there, the Serbians were much less fazed by it than we were. They were used to conflict. They understood how they fit into this particular conflict, and they have seen it before. In the 90s. NATO was bombing Serbia, and so they have some background with that.
Right. So it was a very different perspective.
Yeah, it was really helpful for me to kind of hear what it felt like for them when they were living with daily bombing. That is something that also motivated me wanting to do this project in Serbia. I had been there when I was an undergraduate. I was studying in Budapest, and a friend of mine invited me to Belgrade to spend Easter with her family. And my first trip to Belgrade, I walked around the downtown and I saw these buildings that were in ruins. And I said, "What happened to this building?" And she said, the U.S. and NATO bombed that in the 90s during the breakup of Yugoslavia. And that was just devastating to me to know that our country was participating in this. And that's beyond, I'm not going to get into the political justifications or criticism of it, but just seeing something that we were responsible for made me feel like if I were a kid there, I'd want some other way of knowing the U.S., right? And so getting this equipment to kindergarten classrooms so these kids would see, look, this U.S. Rotary Club cares about us and cares about our future. Right. That is another piece of the whole picture that they see.
And do you think that objective was accomplished? Do you think that they came out having this perspective of caring people, knowing that there are people on the other side of the water that care for them and care for their well-being?
For sure. Yeah. They were such gracious hosts when I went to visit. It was very sweet going to the classrooms and seeing the kids being so thankful. And the administration too, that these are people who aren't necessarily supported. We think about our preschools and think about how hard our teachers are working. So for them to have somebody from fly across the globe to congratulate them and support them.
Means a lot.
Yeah.
Do you envision yourself going on any future service trips with the Rotary?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Right now, the next big project, we're talking with a partner in Adams who has a connection to the Philippines.
Wow.
So each year, the Pittsfield Rotary Club gives a dictionary to every third grader in Pittsfield. And the kids love it. And they it's the same thing for them. They see that somebody cares about them and about their future. And so this previous Rotarian who now lives in Adams has family in the Philippines. And when they visited, they saw that the kids were really interested in dictionaries because one of the avenues to success is mastering English. And so they have an interest in getting dictionaries. So we're going to look and see if we can do some kind of partnership to get to the Philippines. Okay. And that seems like that would be a nice site visit, I have to admit.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country, and beautiful people too. All right. So Alex, you're super busy, and in addition to your Rotarian work, in addition to your other presidency with CW Mars, I mean, I could cite, you serve on several boards, right? And I think what I want to know is, how do you determine the ways in which you'll spend your time, because, time is something that's limited. And so, but you definitely are involved with multiple organizations. So do you have determining factors to say, this means X, Y, and Z to me? Do you have this sort of mental checklist that you go by?
Yeah. I suppose this is something I kind of thought everyone does, but I try to question, why me?
Yeah.
Why am I the one to do this particular task? And so one of my favorite service projects is working with Habitat for Humanity for the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, the VITA program. And why me? Because I don't think anybody else gets as excited about doing taxes.
You get excited.
It's so good.
Okay.
I think about how we generally think about taxes, and I think we have this perception of folks who have a lot of money paying, they're paying their accountants and their tax lawyers to figure out how to get them the best deal. And I want that for everybody. So it's been interesting for me to work through some of the ways that we could help some of our neighbors do the best on their taxes.
Okay. All right. Well, who knew?
Yeah. And then we're bringing back over $1 million in tax refunds from the over 500 tax returns
Alex,
that we do in a year.
You're a man of many talents. Many talents. All right. Listen, we're down to about 3 minutes. So I want to ask you who or what inspires you before we close out.
Oh my gosh, Roberta. That is like the biggest question. We should have started with that. We have a whole hour.
You got a minute.
I mean, everybody really does. I have to say, in different ways.
Yeah.
I can look at you and be very inspired for sure.
Alex.
We had a little dance party before we started talking.
Did.
And when I think about, just thinking about how you are raising kids and working your husband is working, everybody's working, and you're running everybody around. That's inspiring to me. When I think I'm complaining about, I have to do this project or that project, I remember, what is Roberta doing today? And here I'm saying, can I make it to the gym or not? I think, what would Roberta do? But
thank you.
Look, I'm inspired by our friends at the Athenaeum.
Yeah.
We have such an amazing friends group. They're there every Monday and Wednesday morning, sorting through the books, accepting donations, figuring out what is going to sell the best. And they're just so devoted. These are folks who worked so hard all their lives, and now they're working harder in their retirement.
And listen, that book sale is the place to be. If you have not gone to one of the Friends of the Athenaeum book sale, you need to get there, because you will find all sorts of treasures and gems, and we have the friends to thank for that.
They're amazing. 3 times a year, July, November, and March. And they raise all the funds that pay for the fun stuff.
Yeah.
All of the Library of Things. We buy extra copies of bestsellers. So for every 3 holds that are on a book, we buy another copy.
Nice.
So that Pittsfield residents don't have to wait too long for that. So they're really inspiring. I think about, I think I told you one of my inspirational go-tos was Aretha Franklin's performance at the Kennedy Center. She was performing Carole King when Carole King was inducted, and she was just so elegant and
Was that when
strong.
she was wearing the fur?
She dropped that fur halfway through, and she looked up at the boxes and just sang it out.
Yes.
And to see her on that stage and know that she was the queen, right?
Yeah.
We might have been celebrating Carole King, but she was the queen.
Absolutely.
And we all have to do that in our days. We have to be proud. We have to stand up.
Absolutely. Find ways to celebrate the small things and not wait. Not wait. We have to find ways. Okay, we have about 50 seconds. One word to describe yourself. If you had to choose one word, what would it be?
Service. Right.
Okay.
Rotary's motto is service above self.
Okay.
The name Alexander comes from helper of mankind, or humankind, excuse me. And so, it's all about service.
Love it, Alex. Okay, everyone, you've been listening to Backstory. Let's hear it on WTBR-FM Pittsfield with Roberta McCulloch-Dews of the Mayor's Office in the City of Pittsfield. We thank our guest, Alex Reczkowski, for joining us today, and I thank you for listening. Have a great day.